Welcome back, I'm the Book Guy, and today we are finally talking about the fantasy works of British author John Gwynne. This guy has written 10 different books, and we are talking about 7 of them today. Let's just outline them all for you right now. We have The Faithful and the Fallen Quartet, with 4 books. We have Of Blood and Bone, with 3 books. And The Bloodsworn Saga, with 3 books. But here's a little caveat, the first 2 of these series exist in the same world. I found that out the hard way because I went in blind and just started with Of Blood and Bone, because my library had the book available. And it wasn't until the 3rd book, when all the characters started mentioning this great event from the past, that I finally looked it up and, it's a sequel series. But it took me a while to notice because he deliberately wrote them to be standalone and not just because I'm dumb at reading. I think. So today we're talking about all 7 of these books across 2 series, Faithful and the Fallen and Of Blood and Bone, all part of the world of the Banished lands. And sometime in the near future I'll read Bloodsworn and we'll talk about that too, but that's for a later video. Some quick facts, these 7 books all take place in a world filled with Norse mythology, with humans, giants, wyrms, and funny talking crows. It also combines some Christian mythology with angels and demons and a war in the heavens. Although it's less drawing from the Bible itself and more inspired by John Milton's Paradise Lost. Not John Minton, John Milton, but more on that later. These books are also heroic fantasy, a particular subgenre of fantasy that focuses on heroes, their noble deeds, and epic quests. Just note, this isn't like superhero fantasy, where every hero is a one-man army in a suit of armor. Instead, heroic fantasy is often deeply tragic, with desperate final stands, brave sacrifices, and ultimately acts of tremendous courage. These books are also incredibly action-packed, like literally non-stop action. It's pretty cool if that's what you're looking for, but it does come at a bit of a price. I often found these books to be not very deep thematically, and for some of the characters to be a little underdeveloped. Again, more on that later. So these books are perfect if you like epic fantasy, lots of action, and heroism and tragedy. But if you like complex and deep fantasy, this may not quite hit the mark for you. And I say that with a lot of regret. You see, about 15 years ago, this series would have been perfect for me. I would have loved it, and it would have been an all-time favorite. Now I'm 35, and I'm like, where's all the ponderous reflections? Can't believe what I've become. Alright, let's dive deeper into these 2 series, and I'll give it an objective review listing strengths and weaknesses, and ultimately help you decide if the books are going to be right for you. Let's start by focusing on the first quartet. The Banished lands once saw a great war between mankind and giants. The humans won, and now they live across the 7 kingdoms. However, there are rumors of the old giants returning and the old powers of the world seeking to reclaim what was lost. Worse is the ambition of the human kings, growing impatient and greedy in times of peace. The kings see their neighbors' lands as an opportunity to turn their kingdom into an empire. Young Corbin wants to be a warrior, and he dreams of learning the sword and doing great deeds to earn the approval of his king. Yet with the return of the giants and the growing tension between all these kingdoms, Corbin might just get his chance for battle all too soon and find it is not what he expected. But a greater threat looms over all. Dark forces are working in the shadows, spurring the giants and the kings into conflict. The God War is coming, as angels and demons seek to bring their heavenly conflict into the realm of the mortals, and a prophecy demands that 2 great champions will rise up for either side, the bright star and the black sun. The triumph of either of these 2 champions will decide the fate of all. This world was surprisingly detailed. It's not as complex as, say, Malazan, but it's getting pretty close to Song of Ice and Fire. And that's saying something because Song of Ice and Fire has an encyclopedia. Point is, I'm impressed by how much was going on in this world, despite it still being a predominantly action-heavy series. The 2 great mythologies in this world building is Norse and Anglo-Christian. So there's a race of giants, there's wyrms, which are great serpents or legless dragons, known as Germanic dragons. There's also the angels and the demons, known as the Ben Elim and the Kadoshim, respectively. The angels have wings made of feathers, and the demons have leather and scales. It's all just so aesthetically cool. Now, I will admit here, I totally thought that this was going to have some Christian themes. I mean, angels and demons, I was expecting some commentary, maybe even a come to Jesus moment. But honestly, no, it just didn't have that. Nothing like it across all 7 books, not even a hint. So this is a unique fantasy world that simply draws upon these old religious concepts. And I also think that's very clear from the start. There's a creation myth in the first book, which suggests that the creator, Elohim, has abandoned his creation, thinking that his interference will only cause more harm. So that shows pretty clearly that this is not a biblical retelling, but something original. Now, a major feature of this world is just the huge number of Norse terms. So obviously names and places and people are named after Norse words, but more than that, there are even words for everyday stuff. For example, instead of children, they use the word bands.
But the women and the
bands
too.
So the language is quite immersive, and there's a lot to learn here. The most challenging part for me is actually keeping track of these 7 kingdoms, because each kingdom has a ruler who is fighting on this chessboard that is constantly moving, so the guy in charge keeps changing. Plus, there are a lot of characters, and it is a little bit hard to remember which character is from which country.
Who are you people?
And if it helps, think of the main country as being Arden. That's where about half the characters in the series come from. The other 2 big countries are Tenebrae and Isiltia, so those were the core 3 to keep track of. And I say this because I read all 7 of these books digitally, as you can probably tell by my printed covers. So Of Blood and Bone I did as audiobooks, Faithful and the Fallen I did as ebooks. I know YouTubers are supposed to have all the sexy deluxe editions of everything, but reading is expensive, man, and I just want the story.
But we don't have that kind of money.
But there is a downside to doing this series digitally because it's much harder to access the glossary of names and places. With a physical book, it's easy just to flip back and double check things so you can keep track of who is from where. So honestly, make use of the glossary when going through this world. There is some magic in this series, but it's a very soft magic system. It's just there to make the action scenes cooler. I'm not even kidding. So a few people can speak spells, throw a fireball, or do some other elemental magic. It really is a simple aesthetic choice because it's cool rather than something complex and thematic. The benefit of a simple magic system is that we can focus on other things instead.
Leaves more time for drinking.
One last world building detail, this world is extremely young. And I can't confirm its exact age, but it's clear that the creation only just happened a few generations ago. So the people of the Banished lands have very limited technology, and they're very new to warfare. So they've literally just discovered the advantages of fighting in formation, or using ranged attacks, or tricks, or strategies. So I think it's a very fresh angle to bring to fantasy. If I had to define the plot lines of these books, for a YouTube video, I'd probably call them classic. These are old school fantasy stories brought back and revitalized. That's kind of what the whole genre of heroic fantasy is all about. We have epic quests all across the world, sometimes to rescue a loved one or find a magical artifact, or other times for revenge. God, I love a revenge quest. So there's huge battles, so warfares, military strategies, and the scale of the conflict just keeps getting bigger across each series too. And there's scheming to claim the various thrones of these kingdoms, assassination attempts, betrayals, and invasions. There were often multiple plot lines within these types, so multiple quests, multiple wars and schemes, etc. But they were unique, and they blended well with each other, so it never felt like we had 3 quests that were basically doing the same thing.
They're the same picture.
But the most important plotline is the prophecy. There is meant to be a champion of light called the Bright Star and a champion of darkness called the Black Sun. This plotline sees multiple people try to claim that title, or then they name their enemy as the other title, and we don't really know what's real with this one. Ultimately, the best way I can describe all these plotlines is just to say they are heroic fantasy. You know what? Let's just dive into that. John Gwynne was massively inspired by 2 big series, Lord of the Rings and The Draenei Saga by David Gemmell. Gwynne openly said in the acknowledgements of these books that he was always growing up reading about Middle-earth and Druss the Legend and his battle axe Snaga and Waylander. So those 2 series really do define this subgenre, so John Gwynne writes stories like that. because I'm here trying to define all these plots and styles and characters for the series, but I just want to point at a big sign that says it's heroic fantasy, because that just sums it up pretty damn nicely.
I don't know what to tell you. That's the easiest way to describe it.
So how do we define this subgenre? So there are a couple of key things. First of all, courageous protagonists. Main characters who are just adrenaline junkies and dive headfirst into every dangerous situation. They don't have to be the strongest or the best fighter, just the bravest. Second, heroic fantasy has very clear-cut good versus evil. There's no morally grey complexities here. I mean, angels versus demons all the way down. And you know what? It's kind of nice to get back to something a little more basic.
Is not this simpler?
So third is heroic acts. I know this is a broad statement, but it can include slaying a dragon and defeating a mighty enemy, but also laying down your life to protect a friend. So it's not necessarily about fighting well, it's the nobility of the act. Now here's the thing, heroic fantasy was extremely popular in the 80s and 90s, but in recent years the genre has faded. Nowadays people want Game of Thrones level of grimdark, or Sanderson levels of magic and world building, or, you know, romantasy, sure, but I honestly believe John Gwynne has been so popular because people are craving this genre. It's the first one of these I've seen in a while, that's for sure.
I need it.
Now, some heroic fantasy can be really cheesy, I won't lie about that, but it can also be very tragic. After all, life doesn't always work out for heroes. They don't always get a happily ever after. There's actually some overlap here between heroic and grimdark fantasy in that our protagonists do not have plot armor. They can and will die. I know that heroic fantasy can be a little overly simple. It can ignore some of the complexities of life in favor of big action and, yeah, maybe a more juvenile worldview. But there's also something to be said for the beauty of it. Stories like this are not just entertaining and fun, they're inspiring.
Folk in those stories had lots of chances of turning back, only they didn't.
It may not be right for every reader, but I certainly understand the appeal. So this genre may not have big complex themes about life, society, or human nature. Instead, it's just very simple themes. Truth and courage. This genre is all about striving for what's good. Sometimes that's exactly what we need. Sometimes we all just need a hero. Just a quick break to hear a note from our sponsor. Our sponsor today is me. Look, many of you know I have written these 3 books, The Immortal Investigations. I just want to let you know that the 4th book in this series, A Broken Bloodline, is coming out in just 1 month. This is an urban fantasy series about a mortal man who finds a secret society of immortals. He may not be able to match their magic and abilities, so he has to be smarter. It's a genre-bender fantasy, including elements of fantasy, crime, romance, and horror, because hell yes. And every book has a few world-shattering plot twists. Do you think you'll see them coming? This series is also available in all formats, including audiobooks. I hope you'll give it a try. Now, let's continue on with our video, and we're going to talk about heroes. There are quite a few characters in this series, and it could be quite tricky to keep track of them all. They all fall very much into one of 2 simple roles, hero or villain. Again, it's heroic fantasy.
I don't know what to tell you.
Yet my favorite part was the fact that every single hero had a nemesis, an evil opposite, their one personal enemy.
I want Spider-Man!
These intense rivalries, across all 7 books mind you, was probably my favorite thing about John Gwynne's writing. The building hatred between 2 opposite characters and the absolute hype when they see each other on the battlefield and you know this is it, it's showdown time. Our number 1 hero in this series is Corbin, from the country of Arden, by the way. Corbin is a young boy who wants to be a great warrior, a bit of a familiar coming-of-age trope here. He befriends a wild wolf, and he's scared of the local witch. But Corbin also has a childhood bully, Rafe, who dares him to do things that get him in trouble. This childhood rivalry ends up extending beyond their small town. Over in Tenebral, the hero Veridus is a warrior who guards the royal family, trying trying to save them from threats. Now, Veridus is fierce, loyal, and he's a damn good fighter. He's also young and determined to prove himself, but he gains a great nemesis, through circumstances, and Veridus must destroy all threats to the throne.
For the Emperor!
And in Isiltir, our main hero is Gwynne. Now, if you don't mind me revealing one small thing, he has a small role in book 1, but then becomes my favorite character for the rest of the series. Like Veridus, he's also a warrior who guards the royal family of his country, but in Gwynne's case, he's super old. He is well and truly past retirement age for a fighter, but with so many dangers, Gwynne cannot afford to retire. And his nemesis also, appears later, but the hatred between Gwynne and this guy was just palpable. Now, unfortunately, I can't really dive into who the villains are in this series because many of them are revealed later throughout the story, but there are several compelling villains in this. One villain believes he is the chosen savior of mankind, another is a liar and a coward who literally runs away from every threat, and one is a petty, stupid guy who just refuses to let things go. There is also a talking crow. Yes, seriously, Cruff is the clever, sassy crow who helps our heroes, but also kind of insults them. Craft is the best. Now, all of this might sound like pretty interesting characters, yeah. So why did I say at the start that the characters were a bit underdeveloped? Let's take a look at that. So I'm going to over-explain this point today, because I know a lot of people get mad at me thinking I'm just trash-talking their favorite character. So I'll be clear, you will love these characters, even though they don't have much personality. Let me give you an example. Let's say Tim here has just lost his mum. She's passed away, and now Tim is sad. Well, we will feel bad for Tim, and we will care about him, but this doesn't tell us anything about who he is. Most people would be sad in his situation. But let's say Tim reacts differently. He refuses to accept his mother's loss, and instead looks into forbidden magic and draws a chalk transmutation circle to bring her back from the dead. Well, that extreme reaction would tell us that Tim is stubborn and reckless, and probably not very good at processing his emotions. That's a Fullmetal Alchemist reference, by the way. So this type of thing happens a lot in Faithful and the Fallen. Our characters will suffer something bad, and we will sympathize with them intensely. We will care very much about whether or not they can get revenge, or free themselves from their pain, or make things right again. But the characters don't have much personality outside of that. That's why I think these characters are sort of two-dimensional. So not totally flat, one-dimensional characters, but not fully fleshed out, three-dimensional people either. Sort of in the middle. They function very well, they fulfill their role in the story, but for the most part, they behave as most people would in that situation. Another aspect to consider here is the simple good versus evil theming of this story. Heroic fantasy is very black and white morally, and that's part of the appeal of the genre.
I don't know what to tell you.
But it also tends to make characterization a little bit black and white too. Our characters are either good or evil. This is a yes or no type situation. There's no Bronn of Blackwater or Deadpool.
Terrible fate, really.
This is especially clear when characters make choices. So there are a few major crossroads in the series where the characters have to make big decisions. And there's some of my favorite moments in the series, but they were ultimately a choice of good versus evil, so there wasn't much nuance there. So that's my take on how the characters are written. It does change a decent amount in the next series, which we'll talk about shortly, but there's one last thing we need to discuss about Faithful and the Fallen. So I was a big doofus and I read the second series first. Now that ended up being mostly fine, but I did have one major surprise. You see, the series has such beautiful action prose. Every fight scene was like a work of art, beautiful, dark, and mesmerizing. Then I went back to Malice and found the prose was much more wooden and even flat at times. It was really jarring going from his 7th book to his 1st because you could see the progression really clearly. Now, over the course of Valor and Ruin books 2 and 3, the prose became more poetic and visceral, and by the time of book 4, it reached the standard I was more familiar with. It's one of the reasons why many John Gwynne fans say, if you want to start his books, probably try the Bloodsworn saga, because the writing is strong and there's no previous reading required. Which, I found out a bit too late, but what are you going to do? Still, this series has literally non-stop action. I swear that we never went more than 20 pages without a fight. It was nuts. Okay, look, maybe it wasn't exactly 20 pages, but just like that's how it felt in retrospect. It's not a series where they are walking for 20 pages and then they fight for 2 paragraphs. There's always something happening. I also really liked how all the action scenes were pretty different. They didn't all feel the same, as often happens in action-heavy books. The enemy changes, the location changes, the strategies employed, and all of it was constantly evolving. So this was perhaps the most impressive thing, the fact that there was so much action and it didn't get boring. Honestly, this doesn't need much elaboration. If you like action, you'll find plenty to love here. Just know that the action becomes more cinematic and epic as the series progresses. Alright, so that's all the information I had specific to Faithful and the Fallen. Now let's move on and talk about the second series, but one little disclaimer here, there are very slight spoilers here. You see, inevitably when you talk about series 2, it kind of hints at where things are now and what may have happened at the end of series 1. Again, I'm keeping it very slight, as vague as I possibly can, but I will put anything spoilery in the concepts segment, the next one, so you can skip to the next one if you're a total Puritan and want to keep it as light and breezy as possible. Alright, let's continue. Okay, remember, slight spoilers in this section. The angels were supposed to be the guardians of mankind. Instead, they have become our occupiers. The Ben Elim want to protect humanity by stopping all wars between the people, but their version of justice is brutally enforced. Many humans are beginning to choke on the binding chains of their protection. Riv is a reckless young girl who wants to join the ranks of the White Wings, human soldiers that serve under the angels. Bleda is a former prince, set to inherit his kingdom, but he's now a prisoner of the angels as punishment for the sins of his parents. He yearns to be free and reclaim his lands. And Drem, a trapper, finds mutilated bodies in the woods. Is this a sign of darkness returning? So Series 2 is actually quite different from Series 1. First, Faithful's books are on an average 650 to 750 pages long, so pretty big. But Blood and Bone was about 450 to 650 pages long, so much smaller and shorter books. Second, Faithful had many characters who were point of view, and frequently switched between them. Blood and Bone has a much more limited scope of just 3 protagonists. And third, Blood and Bone has a lot fewer factions of humanity, so it's no longer a big, complex chess puzzle of multiple warring kingdoms. Instead, it's more humanity on a united front versus, not humanity. So it's much easier to keep track of everything and tell who's on what side.
We can take them.
The world building changes a bit more in this series too. We focus a lot more on angels and demons and their culture and their government within these various peoples. The Ben Elim are very self-righteous, and they're kind of racist too. They think that they're better than everyone else, and that they know better than everyone else. There's also more magic. So in Faithful, we just have glimpses of elemental magic that's mostly for cool battle scenes. But in the second series, we get a second magic system introduced, literally called Blood and Bone, the name of the series. It's a much darker magic that's all about using the flesh of the dead to build something new. Yes, a little bit of light body horror, a bit of Frankenstein stuff going on here. I would argue that it is still very much a soft magic system, and again, mostly just a cool way to include scary monsters. The plots here are very different too. They're no longer the huge sweeping epics of the first series and much more focused in on our 3 protagonists. Riv's plotline is all focused on the internal politics of the angels. She is deeply loyal to them and sees them as the saviors of mankind, but her belief is about to be tested. And running in tangent is Bleda's plotlines, so he's the angels' prisoner, and he has the opposite belief to Riv. His plot is all about finding allies, rising up and reclaiming his throne. There's a lot of overlapping tension between Riv and Bleda regarding their opposing beliefs. And Drem is probably the most interesting to me because he's out in the woods working with his dad to solve a murder mystery, basically. But there are lots of secrets that even his dad is keeping from him. So there's a trade-off. I honestly think Series 2 is not as grand or epic as the first one, but it is much more focused. And I will say, I thought the character writing was definitely a step up. These characters I found to be more sympathetic, but also have more personality traits. Not just the heroes, but the villains too. I thought this was all stronger on a whole. Our hunter, Drem, is very clearly autistic. And I know they don't use the word directly because it's a fantasy realm, but Gwynne did say specifically that he wanted to write a character with autism for one of his sons who also has autism. And I just love to see supportive parents. So Drem is very detail-orientated and enthusiastic about hunting and the forest and the animals, but he's also quite socially awkward around people, and he's very dependent on his dad to help him understand social cues and avoid offending people unintentionally. And in true John Gwynne fashion, Drem has a nemesis, and I can't reveal who they are.
Not even a little bit.
The protagonist, Bleda, is a hostage of the Ben Elim. He's polite and quiet and obedient, but inside he has burning hatred for the angels that he hides every day. This guy was more developed too, because we see that there are multiple sides to him, the mask he wears every day, and the reality. And Riv has a temper on her, so she wants to earn her place as a soldier for the angels, but she needs to learn patience and control. I just love a character with a fatal flaw like this, some major problem that holds them back, even if it's just, angry, one emotion, but sometimes it's all it takes to add depth and layers to a character. I also like the villains in this series too, because in typical heroic fantasy fashion, this series has some pretty clear-cut heroes or villains, one or the other. And I can't tell you who the villains are, but I liked that they weren't just power hungry. This series really delved into what made these villains tick. One of our villains is convinced that they are the victim, that they have been wronged and that they are entitled to their vengeance. It's that blindness and self-delusion that makes them so hateable, but I definitely thought it was a step up in character writing. Another villain is just straight up insane, like freaking crazy. I loved it. I also think the villains were explored more as well. We have more chapters from their perspective and an inner monologue that revealed their twisted thought process. So again, character writing was stronger across the board. Oh, I should mention, there is also another talking crow. Yay! So this is a curious case of representation, because when I accidentally read Blood and Bone first, I was very impressed that many of the main characters were women. And, normally heroic fantasy is a bit of a sausage fest, but Blood and Bone had a pretty damn strong female presence all throughout. And then I went back to Malice and there was hardly any women. Now yes, obviously there were some women, but they were very much in the background in the first book. There's nothing problematic, there was just a notable absence. And then book 2 brought a lot more women to the forefront of the story, and then each subsequent book included women more and more. And you know what? I love seeing this. I love authors actually pause and say, you know what? I can do this better, and make a conscious effort to improve. So if you stick with it, you will see some solid depictions of women. And I also liked how quite a few women were villains too. Moving on, the issue of race is hardly mentioned, which is curious because there are multiple fantasy races at war with each other, but there's just not that much prejudice between them. So it doesn't really come up. It's very much a non-issue here. That said, in the second series, there was one interesting plot point I quite enjoyed, where the angels forbid relationships with humans. And this could very much be seen as a depiction of racial supremacy and ethno-nationalistic ideology, for sure. You might even read into it as a metaphor for interracial couples, for example. Also, there are 0 LGBT characters anywhere in this series. Nothing anywhere. Now, I was a bit curious about this, so I went down a rabbit hole. Brace yourself, because I was thinking, this is Norse mythology. Weren't they pretty accepting of gay people? No, the opposite. So the archaeologist Neil Price, who specializes in Viking Age Scandinavia and has written multiple books on the topic, once said that Norse society was possibly the most homophobic society in all of history. It's a hell of a statement. Apparently men were called slurs like ergi, and it was considered so offensive that you could legally challenge someone to a fight to the death over the insult.
I challenge you.
Although there is some debate as to whether this only occurred after Christianity spread to the area, and maybe pre-Christianity was more accepting than that. So an argument could be made for historical accuracy. But then you could easily include a character who's in the closet, as usually happens in a situation like that. That said, I did find this old discussion where a fan specifically asked John Gwynne about including LGBT characters, and he said he just hadn't thought about it, but it was something to give more thought to in the future. So I don't think he was going for historical accuracy, but anyway, that was a fun rabbit hole. Point is, this is a very heteronormative story, so just do with that what you will. I am curious to see if that changes in the next series. Also worth noting, there is that neurodivergent character Drem in the second series, which I thought was an excellent depiction of a person with autism. So no notes, that was very well done. So pretty decent content warning for this one. It's not extreme, but it doesn't really pull its punches either. So all of the books have a ton of action violence, often with blood and gore. There were a few rare scenes where we're approaching some light body horror too. One guy gets crucified, one guy gets corrupted by magic, others die by impaling, so there were some pretty brutal deaths. And yet, it also didn't go into too much detail about the gore, leading a lot of it up to your imagination. There was one dark plotline in the second series about people disposing of unwanted infants, so that was pretty dark content. There is no sex or smut in the series as well. However, there is one plotline in Book 2, Valor, where a woman is enslaved and then strongly implied to include repeated rape. So there's nothing seen on page and it's never glorified in any way, but it is deliberately meant to be creepy, so trigger warning there. And there's also very little swearing. So ultimately, remember, this is not grimdark, it's much more optimistic heroic fantasy, so the violence is really only there to make the bravery stand out more. Now, is the ending worth it? So, in both of these series, I thought the final book was the best book in that series. It was the most satisfying. It's where we finally got the culmination of these rivalries between the heroes and villains, and all the big showdowns, and the greatest acts of heroism, and that sweet, sweet justice. At the same time, the final book was often the most heartbreaking too, so be warned about that. Now, I will add, both of these two series wraps up pretty well on its own. There's no cliffhanger. If you only read one of these series, it won't force you to go and read the other, so they are very self-contained. And how much should you try? Look, this is a bit of a trickier question. For one, you can really read these two series in any order. I mean, Fateful is bigger and more epic, but then Blood and Bone is quicker, easier, and somehow deeper? So if you're a completionist like me and you're going to read all 7 anyway, you really should start with Faithful and Malice. But that said, while I think Malice is a solid book, it's not quite a reflection of John Gwynne's true quality as a writer. If you pick up Faithful, I would strongly recommend reading at least the first 2 to get a fair sampling of what the series is like. If you finish Valor and you're still not connecting with it, then by all means at that stage move on. But give it some time to grow on you and you'll see what the big deal is about the Banished Lands. So, good luck and happy reading. So let me know your thoughts on these books. Did I convince you to read them, or was I completely insane to review them this way? I'm sure you'll tell me. If you want to support my work, please check out my books, The Immortal Investigations, an urban fantasy series with monsters, magic, and mystery. Remember, the 4th book is coming out in just 1 month, and it would mean the world to me if you would give it some love. Please also check out my online shop and my Patreon if you would like to say thanks. I'll see you next time, and I hope you enjoy a good book today. Bye!